Okay, so we are going to be working on a stop motion puppet today. There are lots of different types of stop motion puppets you can make. We're going to be making quite a basic one, but I've got some other examples of puppets too. We are going to be using a few different materials today. We're going to be using aluminium wire, Sculpey, and tin foil. So the kind of thing we're looking at is making a head out of some Sculpey. So this is going to be one of the first steps we're going to do, and then we're going to make the rest of the armature body, and then we can look at packing that out to make it into a more fully formed character. So in a lot of the films, stop motion puppets are often made from very complicated, ball jointed figures that can get very expensive. But for very short animations, this is maybe a little bit overkill and not necessary. The reason these are often used is because they're going to be used a lot throughout the filming of whatever animation you're making, and these are very durable and can be fine-tuned throughout. So my background is as a fine art sculptor. Along the way I've done many different things, but one of the things I did do along my journey was to make some stop motion puppets for students and for short films. One of the films I worked on, we made characters that would be much bigger than this. These were actually made as prototypes, designs, character designs for a much bigger puppet that was about this big, made and fabricated by a company that specialise in making puppets, called McKinnon & Saunders, and they've made puppets for Fantastic Mr. Fox, Corpse Bride, and many other animations, including Bob the Builder. So when I'm sculpting, quite often I start with the head, because generally if you get the head right, then you kind of know where you are with the rest of the figure, and also you can check the scale is going to be right. This puppet, this head here, is actually for a sculpture I made. I made a mould and I then created a much larger figure, which is going to not be animated, but if I wanted to, I could make a mould and I could create an armature and we could actually create an animation from this. But it's a bit overcomplicated and a bit too time consuming for what we're going to be doing. When I work with my sculptures and things, I make little 3D printed skulls. This allows me to kind of get anatomy right and allows me to save material too and make the head much lighter. But we're going to look at a method using tinfoil today, which will get the same effect. So, what we're going to need to start making our puppet, first of all, is a design. Today I'm not going to be working from any particular design, I'm just going to sort of wing it and create something just as I go, but I still need some kind of template. So, template I'm looking at using is just from a very simple drawing, and the reason I have this template is just so I can keep referring back to it just to check the sizes are right. So this is going to be my template. What else I'm going to need is my ingredients: aluminium wire, block of Sculpey, some tin foil as yet unopened, and some tools. Now, tools can come in lots of different shapes, sizes, and complex. So, one of the set of tools I like to use is these sculpting tools, otherwise known as wax sculpting tools, and also kind of combining things like you might recognise this as sort of like a dental tool. Maybe this one in particular. But what we're not doing, we're not necessarily using the sort of pointy end, like for using maybe scraper teeth. We actually like to use the back curve for doing things when we're using these kind of tools. So maybe like nice straight lines. So they're nice and thin, and they can get some really nice marks. These are other tools I like to use, these little ball end tools. But you're probably not going to have these when we're working, so we maybe don't have to worry about those, but they are great to have if you're going to be making lots of things. Other tools I like using are these ball stylus, which look kind of like funny little weightlifting tools, but they are fantastic for smoothing out, pressing in to get indentations. So you might need some sort of little indent or socket, particularly great for making things like eyes. And then I have a variety of tools I made myself. So these are lovely. These are great for just removing and smoothing out small amounts of clay. But they're actually made from guitar wire. And the curves, sorry, the way that the metal is wound and bound creates this sort of nice little combing technique, which is very good for taking off just small amounts of clay and sort of taking out little bumps and things like that. The other tools I've made are these little tools here. These are actually made from very fine saw blades. This one here in particular is a jeweler's saw blade, and it's great because the little teeth on it are great for just removing material. This is a different saw blade, and I've got large areas to take off. I can use this, and another curved version. Now, if somebody wanted to use those kind of tools, or have those kind of tools, I could always help somebody make those in the 3D workshop. But as we don't have access to that at the moment, other tools that can be great are very simple wooden tools that we might find in a craft shop, and they're okay. I do prefer to use plastic or metal tools because they tend to have a nicer edge, more consistent edge. But these are useful too. Sometimes I find these are perfect for the job you need to do. But one of the best tools you could probably use is this simple bamboo skewer or a cocktail stick. Really nice for making little marks, smoothing out material, dragging and creating lines. So I'm going to try to use this as much as I possibly can, but I may occasionally use some of my tools just because I'm trying to rush through and do something quite quickly, but you don't need special tools to make something. The only limit is your creativity. One of my favourite tools for sometimes just doing very interesting mark making is this, the humble toothbrush, and you can use this for pressing down to create sort of stipples and marks. So in particular on this head I made, which is me, I was able to press it all over, creating these sort of stippling, which kind of created the sort of stubble effect of a shaved head. We could also use some simple tools like knives. I like to keep this one in my toolbox. Nice big blade, bit lethal looking, but mostly I just use this for cutting my block. That's all. I don't really use it very much in the model making process, but you could use just the kind of like cutlery knives you have at home, as the material we're using is non-toxic and it doesn't really stick to your tools. Finally, paintbrushes. Now, I'll come to this later. You won't necessarily need them for what we're going to do today, but they're really useful, and I might use them in the model I make today. Right, so as I said, we're going to start off with the head. So the head, we do not want to suddenly get a big lump of material, make it into a ball and try and start shaping it. For two reasons. One, it's going to get very heavy, and it's going to use a lot of material. The other reason is that when we're going to be baking our modelling clay, and when we bake it, we don't want the material to be very thick because we're only going to be baking it on a low temperature for a short amount of time. So we only want to be using quite a thin layer, probably no more than 6 millimeters, which it often says on the packet is probably its limit. What you can do is you can sometimes cover you can create a tin foil shape and you can cover it in Sculpey. You can then bake it and then you can work with it again, but you might start needing other materials to help you with that. So we're trying to avoid that today, but there is a possibility of baking again as a way of increasing the amount of material you're using if you really need to. So first thing we're going to need is some tin foil. So I just picked up some tin foil from the supermarket, nothing special about it, and this is going to be great for making our head to start with. And we may use this in other places on the body just to kind of get some extra form. So I'm just ripping off a sheet, not very big. So, and I'm going to use some aluminium wire. Now, to start with, I'm just going to take a length of aluminium wire, and I want it to be about double the length of the body I'm going to be making. So just so I can bend it over. You're then going to need to cut the wire. Now, another tool I didn't actually mention, which was going to be really useful, is a pair of pliers. Now most people have these at home or in their toolkits or wherever they have them, but not essentially if you don't have them. The aluminium wire is quite soft, so it's quite easy to cut. You probably could cut it with a pair of scissors, but it might blunt your scissors, so if you have got pliers, try and use those instead. Now, I'm going to make a little loop that fits inside the head, like so. I'm then going to just fold the wire over, and then I'm going to grip it with my pliers, and I'm going to use this pen. I'm just going to use it to twist my wire. Like so. Okay. So what we should have is a little loop with a twisted bit of wire, and that's going to act as the spine and the inside of our head. Okay. What I'm now going to do is just screw up some tin foil into a nice tight ball. And I'm just going to put that into my loop if I can. And sometimes I find just bashing up the table just to kind of create a better shape. I'm now going to get another bit of tin foil, and I'm just going to wrap this around the head. Okay, now I'm going to try and squeeze it a little bit, and maybe roll it on the table a little bit. I'm trying to just, what I want to do is sort of roughly make it into a sort of head shape if I can. Okay, so we've got a sort of back part of the head and a bit of jaw, so the flatter sort of side is going to be the face. Like so. And this is going to be the inside of a head or the skull. Right, now it's time to crack open the Sculpey. I also have my nice sharp knife for opening the back. And I'm just going to cut off a strip. Maybe two. Okay. Now, this is Super Sculpey. It comes in different types. It also comes in firm and medium. This is the soft semi-translucent material, which is nice because it's a nice fleshy colour. So some people actually like to use this, and then maybe they don't need to paint it. They can just leave it as is if they want to have that sort of fleshy colour. And a lot of designers, character designers, all like to use this. So it's great material, and one of the things you'll find is when you first start using it, it might be a little bit firm to start with. When you bend it or anything, it might crack. And what we need to do is sometimes just give it a bit of a conditioning, just kind of get it nice and soft. It has the sort of consistency of plasticine, but it's much nicer to use and it's not as oily. It's really is a lovely material to work with because it doesn't really make your tools messy. It doesn't have an odour as such. It's quite a nice smell actually, and it doesn't have that sort of oily residue on your fingers after using it that makes you feel like your hands are dirty. So it's nice and clean to use. Now I actually have a pasta maker at home, and my pasta maker is fantastic for, I just sometimes squash it out a little bit and I feed it from a pasta maker and it makes it into nice flat sheets, and it also, then I can roll it through a few times, and it's what we call conditioning the material. But just kneading it with your fingers is the same thing. Sometimes folding it over a couple of times and kneading it out does help just to get that right kind of consistency. Okay, so first things first, we're just going to put the Sculpey and we're just going to wrap it around the tin foil. Nothing special about this part, just trying to make sure we've got a nice covering, a few millimeters thick. Okay. So if you're watching the video and you're following along at home, you're probably going to be working at a similar kind of speed. It's fresh out of the packet, so it does need a little bit of work with my fingers. Sort of jumped ahead of myself and put on some too quickly, and it was a bit stiffer. Now, kind of warming it up in your hand makes it nice to work with, but I wouldn't try and cheat and start using a hairdryer or putting it in the oven or anything, because you're going to make it hard and it's going to be baked and then you can't get it back again. Now, one of the lovely things about working with Sculpey is you could just start working on this now, you can leave it and come back to it and it's going to be absolutely fine. It'll be just like you left it. Okay, so you can leave this for days, weeks, years even, and it will stay exactly the same. Okay, I actually got some old Sculpey that I had from about 12 years ago, and I got that out of a box recently, and it was put it from my pasta maker, and my children used it and it was fine. So it's got a nice long shelf life, so if you have some, you may not want to use it again straight away, but you might decide in a year or so you want to give it another go. So it's not going to dry out like a dry clay, and when this is made, when we've got a design that we want, so getting about right, we can, when we bake it, we can also sand it, and we can then paint it if we want to. So it's a really versatile material. So some of you may have used something called Fimo or Fimo before, and that's nice. I used to use that as a kid, but you'll notice a considerable difference in the quality of modelling using Sculpey as opposed to that kind of one you may have used for making jewellery or Christmas tree decorations like I did when you were younger. Okay, so we've roughly got the shape we require. Now, I'm probably going to be a bit naughty and I'm going to cheat a little bit today. These are my two favourite tools. This one's really nice because it's got a nice flat curved tool, and this other one here which is very good for sort of smoothing down. So this is one of my favourite tools because it's not very sharp, it's just like all rounded, but it gives nice little lines for just marking the clay. This other tool, now the knife is very good just for while I'm working, just cutting up shapes, things like that. But the bit I really like is this little bit on the end. It's like a tiny spoon, and use like the back of it for sort of creating shapes. Now, we might want to mark out, first of all, sort of our face where the eyes and centre of the head are going to be. Now I'm going to sort of just create a sort of generic face, something that looks vaguely human because I'm kind of used to it, but I'm not too worried about following any particular design today. One of the things you may notice as you're modelling and you're sort of feeling the material in your hands, it's actually not very heavy, which is great. And we don't want to make it too heavy by adding more material because we don't want it to get too big. We want to keep referring back to our design just to check it's not too big. A hem. This one actually I haven't really fully decided. I think I'm making a hem. Could turn into an old lady. I do quite like story about Baba Yaga at the minute, so it could turn into Baba Yaga. I'm just sort of, like I said, I'm just experimenting, having a bit of fun with it. Do you quite like sort of more aged characters? They've got a bit more interesting stuff going on in their face. So, at this stage, something a bit caveman about this character. I mean, you could be quite inventive. You could find things in the house that can do some of these jobs too. Marbles, ball bearings. You could use some beads for eyes if you wanted to. Sometimes some people like to do that. Or we could just make some. There's no hard and fast rule about how we model. It's just a case. Experimenting and seeing what works and what doesn't. I mean, these eyes are quite big I'm making, so he's quite a sort of stylized character today. Like I said, if I had more of a design or some images to work from, or was measuring, getting something more accurate I could do, but I'm not going to worry today. A really interesting technique for doing the eyes could be, I'm going to just go for a bit freeform today, but if you really wanted to, you can make the eyes, just get them the size you want to be. You could bake the eyes so they harden up, and then you could put them in and then when they're hard, you could put them in, and that way they won't distort or change shape as you're modelling, which can be a really nice way of working, because I always find that sometimes you're squashing and pulling, and sometimes you have something you really like and then you keep working and then somehow you end up damaging and distorting the things that you really like. So eyes in particular, you might get the shape perfect, and then as you start to work, like I'm about to do now, you might end up realising that you have squashed the eyes out of shape and suddenly one of the eyes looks a bit small or something like that. I'm also trying to be a little bit aware that I don't add too much material. sort of have a rough face that might be interesting to do some animation with. So I just want to sort of try and finish the head as quickly as possible. So to do that, I'm thinking I don't want to spend long time making hair and ears and things like that. So I think I'm going to have a quick drink, and then I'm going to make some kind of hat for him that will kind of mean that I can cheat a bit and move ahead a bit quicker. Okay, so back in a minute. I'm going to have a drink, and then we shall see where this little character turns up next. Okay, so we are back, and I'm going to now think about some sort of hat. So I've got a piece of Sculpey I've just squashed out a little bit. I'm going to do it a little bit, cut a bit more. Make sure you're careful if you're using a sharp knife like that one. Now, you might want to just roll it out, so you can use a rolling pin, pencil, whatever it is you've got to hand. I'm using my favourite little ball stylus tool. So I'm just going to squash that out a little bit more. I'm just getting a knife. I'm just going to cut along there. So I've decided that he's going to have some kind of hat on. Carefully, I'm working on quite a messy workshop table. So I just want to put the material on, see what feels right. Okay. And what I'm thinking is he's some strange kind of aged pilot, I think. Spoon. Sorry for just blurting out spoon. I think spoons are a great tool as well, because they've got that smooth back, so you could just use the back of a spoon. Sometimes that could be a really great thing. That's called burnishing. It's a good way of just smoothing out, blending. And just sometimes rolling a tool is a really, really good method. I mean, this isn't necessarily how stitching is, but as long as it reads like stitching. Those little details can help bring your character to life. Okay, I think the sculpting is done, but if you look closely where I've been working, you can see a lot of tool marks on the face which are a bit rough and not the best. So I'm going to now use a technique for smoothing out polymer clay, making it really nice to sort of look at. So I've got this little bottle here, and it's got something called isopropyl alcohol, or rubbing alcohol in it. Now, I'm not going to say this is, you must have this, because you could work with tools to get a nice smooth finish. But this is a really nice way of getting sort of a nice finish on your model with not much effort. And it sort of helps just dissolve the surface of your model. If you are going to get some isopropyl alcohol for finishing off, one, you have to do it before you bake it, and two, try and work in a pretty well ventilated space. I could fiddle with this all day really, but I think there's a point where I have to just decide it's time to stop, and that is in a minute when I finish this bit of lip. Okay, so I think this is pretty much done. I'm just going to very carefully just want to trim that bit off. Okay, so that is it for the head. Time to go into the oven, and then we can look at building the rest of the armature. Okay, so this is bye for the moment from me and Yuri. She's now Yuri, that's who he is, and we'll be right back. Okay, so I have now baked the head. So you put the head in the oven for 15 minutes on 130 degrees C, and as you can see, nice and hard now. So I'm just checking it looks right in my figure, and I'm happy with that. So we're going to start making the armature body. So what I'm going to do first of all is get some aluminium wire. Nice length. I'm just going to trim that off. And what I want to do is, first of all, I'm just going to roughly shape it. I'm using the middle to get it down to about the same length as the hands going through there. And then I'm just going to fold it over and bring it back up. Okay. So it's like that. Okay. So what I want to do now is, again, I want to make some loops. So I want to get something maybe round that I can just pop into where the hand's going to be. And then take my pliers. I'm just going to hold it and just twist that around again. And do the same on the other side. Make sure you're gripping both ends of the wire at the same time. So you could use a pencil or a pen to do this bit. Yeah, once I've got it twisted a bit, I can just do the rest by hand. Okay. Oops. Sort of got into a bit of a crazy shape, but that's fine. Okay, so what we should have is two lengths which are about the same size as the arms. Then I'm just going to place the wire overlapping. I'm just going to wrap it around the excess around the body. You don't have to worry too much if it's moving around. It'll just help us get it into shape. Okay. So we have a sort of stick man. So we just want to make sure we've got enough. So he's got a neck. Bend that out. Right, now I'm going to do the legs. So same again. Let's get a nice long length. And it's better if you can to have a bit more than you need. So find the middle, bend it down to the ankle, and then I'm just going to fold it over and then bend it back up the leg, and same on this side. And it's very cold in the workshop again, so I apologise if I start sniffing. Right, so this time I'm just going to twist the wire over. I'm just going to do it with my fingers, it's actually a bit easier. And you might be working on a character that is maybe got short arms, long legs, or long legs, short arms. It's up to you, depends on what your character is going to be like. And this time I left a little bit left over on the sort of spine, so I'm just going to twist that around. So essentially just twist as much wire as I can, just to make it nice and stable. Right, so there we have it. I have a sort of stick figure for my character. Now, it doesn't matter if it's anatomically correct, if that suits your character, but I'm trying to go for something that's in the realms of normal human figure. Like so. Let me get my tin foil again. I'm just going to squash that down and just use it as a little bit of padding around bits of wire I've already made. Feel immediately start to feel a bit stiffer. Okay, so he's got sort of rib cage happening. Okay. Now I'm just going to get a bit of Sculpey. I'm just going to build that up around that part of the body that I've covered in tin foil. Squashing it on, just building it up a little bit. There's no wrong or right answer on how you do this, but it's just going to give us a stable base. if you go online, you'll find lots of different methods for doing this, where you can maybe improve the way you're going to start working. You could use, people sometimes use brass tubing and soldering in order to make a character, something that works really nicely. But like I said, if we're just doing a short animation, something that isn't going to be very long, you don't necessarily have to worry too much about how durable this is. One of my favourite illustration animation people is by a man called Red Nose Studio, and if you look at his characters, they're very simple. But if you go into, if you have a look at some of his animations, it's actually a lot that he can do with a very simple puppet. Or he uses them for posing, making characters for his illustrations. So what we're trying to do here is think about how the body bends and moves. So we want to make sure we've got a nice amount of wire that's going to poke out for his neck, so we can move the head around. And we also want to give as much movement in the shoulders as we can. Just pushing some of this back. And the spine should give us a lot of movement. So if you think about the figure, the pelvis is quite a large bony area, so is the rib cage. So they don't move a lot. Most of the movement in the body comes from the spine, which is in between those two. Okay. Now, I'm going to just go straight on with the Sculpey, because I think it'll stick slightly better to the wire. Now, we're not wanting these to provide a lot of strength, these bones we're going to sort of put on, but purely to help just create areas of stiffness. is our rough armature. Okay, so I've got the epoxy, sorry, the Sculpey roughly where I want it. It's acting as sort of points to stiffen and just give it a little bit of strength around where we've joined our aluminium wire together. And I'm going to go and pop this in the oven for 15 minutes on 130 degrees C. The head should be absolutely fine going back in the oven. So we'll bake that, then we'll look at hands and feet. Okay, so I'm back from the oven and I have my puppet and I've just spread his arms out a little bit. And what I'm going to do now is we're going to look at fleshing out our character. So I've got some foam, you'll hopefully have that with you. And I'm just going to get a marker pen and I'm just going to draw out the shape of the character on the foam, making sure I have extra around the figure. Okay, so once I've done that, I'm just going to cut out our fleshed out figure. Now it's better to actually go to the outside of the line than cutting on the line, because we prefer not to cut too much off. And then repeat. So we've got our two halves. Now, what I'm going to do is just draw around this. I'm just going to hold it up with a bit of a bump. Do the same again. Okay. And then we'll try and glue that up together. So to glue it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my two pieces, I'm going to put them on some paper away from this nice working area in a ventilated space, and then I will spray each of these two surfaces, which I've decided are my inside surfaces, and I'm going to give them a good spray all over, just on this side, and then just let it go a little bit sticky, and then hopefully what we should be able to do is put the figure in and then press the two layers of foam together so that they stick on nice and securely, and I'll be right back. Okay, I've sprayed both surfaces. I gave them a really good coating, but it does take a little bit of time. I'm just going to let them dry for we've been letting them dry for a minute or two. It should start to get a little bit tacky and sticky, and that's really what we want. We don't want to stick them together wet, we want them to kind of get to that sticky stage. Once we've got that, we're going to place our figure inside, making sure the limbs are sitting nicely to the middle. You should see it sort of wanting to stick to the figure. Okay, and then we're going to get the other half, which is sticking to. I'm going to place that over the top, making sure again that it is just pressing those two halves together so that our armature is completely encased in the foam. So he's now And if you have something heavy that you can place at the top of that to help. So I've got this piece of board, and I'm just gonna I've got a couple of stone balls I'm just gonna place on top, just to make sure it's stuck. And we're going to leave that for an hour, so that we know that it's really stuck together, and then we can start trimming the foam to make it a bit more like a proper figure. Alright. Okay, so the foam is nicely glued on, and what I'm going to do now is just get some scissors, and I'm going to just start going around and just trimming the foam. In order to make it a little bit more human shaped. So we get some nice curves going on rather than these hard edges that we created. As you can see, it's already starting to look much better. What I would probably do now is maybe get some cosmetic scissors, which would be like perfect, and we could start trying to trim it a little bit closer, a little bit neater. Obviously with a pair of scissors like this it's very difficult, so I'm going to just keep trimming and I'm going to come right back. Okay, so I've trimmed him a little bit. I've added some extra bits of foam to the front and the back. I'm just going to keep doing a bit more trimming just to kind of get it a little bit more close to how I want it, and then we can. Then I'm going to make some hands and feet. Now, I left this overnight. Some of the spray mount started to peel back a little bit. In that case, I'm just going to use some Yoo-hoo glue and just glue those bits back in place. Once this is covered in clothes, none of that's really going to matter because then all the foam's contained. If you were doing a character where maybe you are going to not have clothes, like a t-shirt or something, you could cut the foam a bit short and then just have it as a sculpted arm instead. I also noticed I've switched from the big scissors to some embroidery scissors. That's what they're called, the ones I have. Okay, so I have my foam body trimmed as I like. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to start having a go at modelling hands and feet. So I'm just going to start making up some feet, so I will just model those up. I'm going to build them up just around the bits of wire so that we can bend them. So we're not going on to where the ankle bone is, so we're going to try and make sure we don't touch that. And then I'll make some hands. Again, we're going to try and, we can just stick them onto the wire, or we could sort of sculpt them onto, depends how much movement you want in your character. So I'm just going to crack on with that, and then we'll do the last baking. Just something, a piece of mind, before you start to add foam, it's probably better that you add the hands and feet for baking when we just have the bones structure, because you don't necessarily want to have the foam going into your oven. I have tested this, foam will go in the oven without melting this foam, but just in case there's any inconsistencies in the foam that you're going to be using, and just any gases or anything like that, I would definitely make sure you do the hands and feet before adding the foam to your body. Okay. I did those fairly quickly, not my finest modelling hour, but enough that we kind of have an idea of just what you need to do in order to make some hands and feet. Like I said before, some complicated characters will maybe have moving fingers and lots of other articulation involved, but what we've got here is we've got a puppet that is generally quite articulated, and the gestures you can do just with a sort of neutral hand expression is often quite a lot. If you wanted a very particular thing like a pointing, or you knew you were going to do something with pressing a button, you could maybe just make the hand into that kind of shape. Keeping the fingers fairly close together is going to make them a bit more durable. If you start having fingers splayed out, then they might start breaking. You could reinforce them by inserting a piece of wire inside them. But I've just wanted to make something that was a very basic but interesting looking character. So I'm just going to pop him in the oven, and then we're done.